Now I know what you're gonna say, but Jay, Mordecai is the biggest simp. But Jay, Finn is the biggest simp. Stop stalking me outside my house. But listen, if we take all of those suggestions and actually talk about him, I am here to make my case that the biggest simp in animation is Brian Griffin. With this episode, be careful what you fish for. Also plug in my Discord. So with the classic Family Guy writing, we have to have this pseudo-exposition that leads us into the Peter and Dolphin segment. Basically, there's cars at the bottom of the ocean and Peter wants them.
Did you hear that, Lois? All them fancy cars out there in the ocean just free for the taking? I'm gonna get me a Mercedes.
Peter, that may be the stupidest idea you've ever had.
You know, as someone who hasn't seen every Family Guy episode, I'm willing to bet my entire YouTube channel that this isn't the stupidest idea that he's ever had. Just off the top of my head, he wanted to marry his own son in fresh air. I know fishing seems boring, but I'd rather that than marrying within the family. In Peter's Two Dads, he decided the next best alternative to drinking was crack. Not even cocaine. Not civilized at all. And then, there's just a decision to keep this show going. Yes, I picked a side.
So for this next cutaway, we're gonna make you read it. That's right, you heard me. Do a little work once in a while, instead of having everything spoon-fed. You want your yucks, put in a little effort. Okay, that one might have been more of a visual, but you feel that feeling you got right now? That's satisfaction. You just read something.
Respectfully disagree, Peter. If I want my 100 IQ, I'm going to another adult animated show. So gather around, let's set the scene here. We have the entire kindergarten class outside on the sidewalk, just like a foot or something away from the street that has cars on it. There's toys and everything outside, but also a mailbox, presumably filled with bills that aren't paid. But above all, there's no parent supervision, which is red flag number 1. Good thing Herbert isn't here, or else this would be the equivalent to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Brian shows genuine concern for Stewie, both picking him up as Lois doesn't have a job and maybe would be available to do so, and asks questions, starting the conversation about how Stewie looks a mess after finger painting. There's a part of me that wants to enjoy this aspect of Brian because I reviewed other episodes before, and under all of that crust from both sides, they genuinely care about each other. It's just too bad to see what this is going to lead into. So Peter and Joe bully Quagmire for wanting his own identity. I see what he was going for, but something tells me that the Quagmire show would be awful.
No.
No is right. They pick up a dolphin who seems very friendly off the gate. Kinda seems like he's also fishing for something. In exchange for a Mercedes hood ornament, he ends up wanting a few things from Peter, including for him to eat dolphin-safe tuna, which is news to me. I never heard of that before. You know what? I took my time, I googled it, you have my word. You know, for all of those times in which I'm not eating bamboo, which is like 1%.
He seems nice.
He does.
Yeah. So, what do you have planned for the summer?
I'm sure he'll be right back.
You know, these guys were friends, but let's get back to Brian, the simp that he is. We get back to this daycare, which is run down, and children are being influenced by it. This episode goes through great lengths to show you that this is not a place for children to stay, and I'm really concerned with Lois's judgment here. I'm going to guess that she saw the person and how nice they are, rather than the living conditions that Stewie would be in. Brian shares the same amount of disgust with me, showing that he, once again, cares about Stewie and sees this as a bad place for kids. So what makes him a simp if he sees all of these things clearly?
Excuse me, are you Miss Emily?
Yeah, hi. Who are you?
Brian. Brian Steele. I was just dropping Stewie off.
Oh, yeah! I should probably go back in there, see how everyone's doing, I guess.
Ah, they're fine.
Look at that, just like that, a true 180. To those who don't know, while an aspect of Brian's character was around the idea of having a lot of romantic partners, but none of them actually working out to be able to go steady, this aspect became a highlight, and as a result, Family Guy as a whole, this show, has been taking this aspect and blowing it out of proportion, with each appearance trying to outdo the rest in Brian's hopeless romantic escapades. The problem is, and this is a big problem, with Family Guy, considering that you're making this for TV, there's a ceiling to show how shocking you can make these skits. And you've hit that ceiling a long time ago. Remember the time when it was as simple as Screwed the Pooch, where Brian was lonely and decided to fornicate with a random dog. Wow, that was really worded terribly, but you know what, that's what happened. I'm sorry, I can't really word it any other way. It went from episodes like that to episodes like Teagues for Two, where Brian would use dating one of Quagmire's first true loves against him to get even. Or the beginning part of Yug Lamoth, where Brian was using Stewie's hard work, a la his time machine, to pick up chicks and bring them back in time, potentially ruining his own timeline. However, I think this is the best example to show his simpery. I hope that's a word. If it's not, it is now. I'm a reviewer, I should know. Now let's play a drinking game. Take a shot every time this dolphin makes a pun as he tries to convince Peter to let him crash in the house.
So anything you can ever do, here I am. Thank you. Squid pro quo. Thank you for not being shellfish. I just said that for the halibut. Fish puns. Oh God.
Alright, stop the clip. Some of you are already having trouble. I like all kinds of humor, including corny humor, so I'm not particularly bothered by this. What separates this from Nickelodeon's implementation of corny humor is that in those shows, that humor is treated like it's squeezed from the bamboo gods themselves. Here, Peter is not laughing to the level that the dolphin is, and I think that is what makes it work.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, and, well, it's just... Would you mind tossing it up in the air for me?
Well, I don't know.
Lois, he is our guest. Toss it in the air.
You know, I haven't been wearing my glasses. I generally don't when I'm recording, so I'm sorry. Unless Peter and the guys were fishing in SeaWorld Quahog, that looked like an ocean. I suppose maybe he's talking about gathering fish to eat, and that's just the way that it always is. Maybe I would give them points if they didn't have them chew for it. Dolphins don't chew. Yes, a little nitpicky today. Chris gives a generic enthusiastic comment and they just dump on Meg. It has nothing to do with Peter's plot, it has nothing to do with Brian's plot. I know it's become a staple, but it's a shame that part of the character development with one-off characters is to bring in a major character just to say nothing new about them. At least make a joke where Billy befriends Meg initially and Meg messes it up. That just seems lazy. So Stewie begs for anyone to stop a disheveled man from picking up the nearest kid to the door, but since there isn't enough budget in the animation, all of the other kids are just regressed to a loop. This episode makes it clear as those windows, that this is not an ideal place for kids.
I thought you said you were going to talk to her. I did, and she's doing her best, you know? She's got a lot on her plate. She's got school, she's got work.
This is her work!
Oh, hi, Brian. I thought you had a busy day at your legal practice.
You know, I feel like Brian has to have heard of Tinder. Look, if Miley Cyrus is in the Family Guy universe among every other celebrity they've mentioned, Tinder is there as well. And you know, Brian, we can set you up on Grindr if you swing the other way. I'm accepting of both. But it's episodes like this that make older episodes hard to watch knowing what this leads up to. Brian wasn't the smartest dog in the pack, but at least he had a moral compass and could serve as the voice of reason. Maybe if the episode made it apparent that Brian was lonely or that Miss Emily was a bit more likable, then there would be some semblance of hope for this episode, but she's clearly inept, and Brian is clearly simping. And worst of all, Stewie has gotten out of bigger messes than this and could easily build something or go somewhere to avoid this, but this episode conveniently has him acting like a baby. All of this is disgusting.
Hey, I'm sorry, but Miss Emily and I have a connection, which is totally unexpected. And by the way, I actually think she's doing a pretty good job. She's teaching you guys independence.
We're one! Independence means we die!
I don't believe even he believes the words out of his mouth. I suppose Stewie can't go back to Lois because she doesn't seem to take Stewie seriously, so family-wise, Stewie's pretty much out of luck. Also, it's such a mouth breather that Brian fished out of the bottom of the barrel, pun intended. Doesn't it sound crazy that Brian would never realize that she's... You know what, let's save that for later because I don't want to spoil that yet. Peter slowly starts to get sick of the dolphin that he fished up, with Lois insisting to watch what sounds like a graphically violent documentary, and also Peter walking in on Billy while he's on the seat.
What the hell? What are you doing?
I'm just making a comment. Need to know something. Do you hear the word morbidly a lot?
Not gonna lie, pretty funny. Someone in the squad was actually laughing. Peter and Lois talk about wanting to get rid of Billy, but forget all of that. Let's focus on the simp of the hour. I want to preface this with a tiny speech, it's real fast. Let us all open up our Urban Dictionary Bible and read simp 1029. A man that puts himself in a subservient submission position under a woman in hopes of winning them over without the female bringing anything to the table. A man that puts too much value on a female for no reason. A man that prides himself with chivalry in hopes of getting sexual gratification from a woman. A simp in this case would not be a guy who makes the first move, or allows a woman to have space, or even takes the third wheel when his girl and another guy who's a friend are having a conversation. There's a clear definition of simp, and I'm using it correctly to describe Brian. Brian has shown throughout this entire episode, despite clear evidence of Miss Emily's ineptitude, that he's willing to overlook all of those glaring flaws and issues for the possibility of getting sexual gratification. Even if you think so far it's been tame, the episode saved the main dish for now, so let us sit back down as a family and experience this together. I won't censor it at all. Stewie comes home with an arm that looks more than a little loose. When Brian wants to know, Stewie says Miss Emily did it after he stood up for himself, wanting something to eat rather than her leftovers. When he goes to tell his mother, Brian blocks Stewie, places a paper in his mouth, forces him to the ground, and shoves his arm back into his socket.
Come on, hold still, Stewie. I'm not saying I like pain, but I'm not saying I don't like it either.
I know Mordecai pushed his best friend into death over essentially a date that he could have had. I know Sheldon dressed up as a robot to try to get with Jenny. I know that I just reviewed an episode where Timmy Turner was willing to gift his way into Trixie's attention. But there's something extremely awful about this scene and how Stewie is closer represented to be a helpless child rather than the evil mastermind that we all know. That makes this scene genuinely terrible. The scene itself, conceptually, is not offensive to me. What's offensive to me is that Brian is pretty much dead in these later seasons. Some say he died when he came back. Others say it happened earlier. I couldn't tell you when because I stopped watching Modern Family Guy a long time ago, but I do know that Stewie's little comment at the end doesn't fix any of this. Billy throws the possibility of Peter having 2 Mercedes hood ornaments, then tosses the excuse aside. Then Billy states that he was thrown out by the missus. The latter of these 2 excuses he ends up telling Lois. Kinda weird that Peter would care more about that than a hood ornament, but hey, you know what? I'm not a writer for the show.
You ready to go?
Yeah, one sec. I'm leaving, honey.
Okay, babe, have fun. I'm probably just gonna take a couple more showers.
Who was that?
That's my boyfriend, Devin. Are you ready for lunch?
What you did to these kids? There is a special place in hell for people like you.
The reasoning that Brian's a bad character and you shouldn't like him doesn't fly here because there was a time when we used to like him. Not only that, but when you take out the female element to his character, those episodes aren't that bad. I guess if the show wanted to make his flaw that he's terrible with women, could we at least keep Stewie's depiction as a baby as far away from that? I know the show wants to be offensive, even though the show hasn't been offensive for a long time, but to me, to invoke that strong emotion, I have to believe that the show actually believes in the crap that they're spewing out. Family Guy costs millions of dollars to produce. You think they're going to truly become offensive anytime soon? And that's a conversation that I don't think the show or anyone behind it is willing to have at the moment. This episode doesn't make me want to see more episodes with Brian. It's a shame too, because the Peter plot wasn't exactly bad. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it was pretty good, but simping is strong. And in the cartoon lands, we've been looking out for them recently.
Hey, gang, I'm Aquaman. Get back together.
That's not Aquaman. Billy, what is going on?
Now that's a show from Quagmire that I'd like to watch. However, let's get some context here. Billy confronts the missus who says, "No, I don't want you back." But then Family Guy does that zoom that they do in almost every episode nowadays when they want to fit the endearing part of the episode in. And I don't care, but apparently that zoom makes everyone forgive each other. I think all of the world leaders should use this. Clearly this is the formula for world peace. Stewie has nothing to say after any of this, totally accepting Brian for who he is and forgiving him. He's a bigger man than I because with that amount of simp behavior and that arm socket scene, this was not Brian in the best light. I'm not saying this is the worst episode to involve Brian, but I think we can all agree here. Brian and Stewie have had better episodes together. In fact, if you want to see one that I covered, Brian and Stewie, click here. Until then, special thanks to the supporters of May, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.